again.
Thank you, Sally. So my name is Kimberly Reiser. I'm chair of the Committee on College and University Governance with the New York State Conference. It's really my pleasure to introduce you today to our speakers for the afternoon session. We have 5 faculty from 3 different institutions, Keuka, CSI, which is the College of Staten Island, and Molloy. And they're speaking from the trenches. They're going to share with us their experiences, and hopefully we'll have a vibrant dialogue where we can share ideas and just strengthen the faculty. So the way that we're going to work the panel, as Sally had said, each institution, some of them have 2 faculty members presenting today. We'll have 15 minutes, and then we'll move into the panel discussion where the panelists can interact, as well as you can ask questions, and then we have a lengthier time for questions. So today we have, we have Nancy Marksbury and Janine Bauer from Keuka, John Verzani and Jane Marcus Delgado from CSI, the College of Staten Island, and Mark James from Molloy. So we will go in that order. So I'd like to introduce Nancy Marksbury and Janine Bauer from Keuka, so you can begin your conversation with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. I'm going to share my screen. I assume that's okay, Sally, so that we can do our presentation. Okay, I hope that you all can hear me okay and that you're able to view our slides. We've entitled this, Can the Middle States Commission for Higher Education Self-Study Process Be Leveraged to Strengthen Shared Governance? And we offer these as insights from the trenches of a sanctioned institution.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janine, and so the purpose of our presentation really, which is very much hinted at by the title, is to really consider how the accreditation and self-study process can be leveraged and understood as a resource to strengthen shared governance at an institution, as well as highlight some of the challenges that we experienced in our efforts to implement sound self-study practices while our institution was undergoing investigation and ultimately sanctioned by AAUP. And so this really kind of speaks to a little bit our unique positions. I myself am a former tenured professor at Keuka College. I separated from the college by choice in the fall of just this past year. I've served on 2 self-study reviews while at Keuka College. The first, I was a member of the steering committee and co-chair of a working group on assessment of student learning and institutional assessment. And then more recently, the co-chair of the self-study process from 2019 to 2021. And I did leave prior to the completion of the self-study process. So I served 15 years at Keuka College before departing in the fall. And Nancy?
Thank you. Yeah, so I was not tenured. I departed by choice from Keuka College just about a month ago. So I was involved, a member of the steering committee for the Middle States Self-Study, and I have also been the secretary and treasurer of our AAUP chapter.
And so for the objectives of our discussion, we're going to recognize the scope and some of the limitations of the Middle States standards in relation to shared governance, identify some of the linkages between AAUP principles of sound governance and Middle States standards for accreditation, And Nancy and I are going to demonstrate how a shared governance matrix or approach may be applied to a case institution, in this case, to our institution, Keuka College, and then draw implications for AAUP and faculty action.
Sorry, Janine, I am.
That's all right. There we go. And so, as you know, some of the discussions from this morning's sessions revealed Middle States is not prescriptive about models of shared governance. And when we examine Middle States standards and criteria, there are 7 standards. And I'm going to rattle these off quickly just so we can hear them. But mission and goals, ethics and integrity, design and delivery of the student experience, support of the student experience, educational effectiveness assessment, planning, resource and institutional improvement, and governance, leadership, and administration. As we hear these, ethics and integrity, for example, planning and resource, institutional improvement, and of course, you know, the student learning experience and educational assessment, we can imagine that principles of shared governance, of sound governance would appear. However, there's no direct reference to shared governance, and if you would hit the enter key there. Oh.
Sorry.
No direct, you're fine. There's no direct reference to shared governance. And when there is a reference to governance, there's a real lack of clarity, whether it's referring to the board, structure, or the faculty, or whatever. So it's not clearly defined. And there are some instances, which were discussed in this morning's sessions, in terms of the criteria on the role of the faculty governance regarding student learning and assessment. But most often, this is left particularly vague. And early on in the self-study process as a co-chair, I, along with the other co-chair, met with and had correspondence with our Middle States liaison, who really didn't provide much guidance in terms of the ways to identify sources of information on shared governance within the standards, and in fact really affirmed that Middle States is not prescriptive about the models of shared governance, and that governance is addressed in Standard 7. And that all of this, of course, is contextualized by the institution's mission. So it really requires a deeper analysis to see those connections between each of these standards and principles of shared governance. It's definitely not going to be identified just through a first glance of these documents.
Sorry, Janine,
It's not cooperating with you. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right. So we really raised the question, where do qualities and conditions of shared governance live in the Middle States standards? And our approach is to examine alignment between the AAUP's indicators of sound governance and Middle States standards for accreditation. Now, I will say this, that we began this exercise following our separation of the college, or in the process of, so this was very much in hindsight. And I would say that if, again, if you could go back and do it again, this is something that we would have likely implemented in the self-study design phase of the process. As co-chairs, my former colleague and I were responsible for directing the design of the self-study. And so those are the kinds of pieces that can be built in looking at these kinds of alignments. And so Nancy's going to talk with you about the alignment between sound governance and Middle States standards.
Yeah, and I'm going rogue, just showing our Google Slides because my computer is not cooperating. So please excuse our informality. So what we did is we took the, let's see, Ramo's 1994 Sound Governance Questionnaire. And from it, we pulled factors, which are simply categories of indicators, and listed the exact phrasing of the indicator, and then went to the middle state standards to try and form a match. And this is much more granular than I think Michael's presentation was evidencing, because, for example, where a middle state standard may have appeared, let's see, let me go. May have appeared, the campus climate supports a diversity of opinions, schools of thought, perspectives, and personal styles. As an example, I felt a match could have been made by looking at standards, or middle state standards on ethics and integrity. So criterion 2, a climate that fosters respect among students, faculty, and staff, and administration from a range of diverse backgrounds, ideas, and perspectives. So using the heuristic of sort of relative connection, I was surprised that we were able to match almost 60% of the indicators for sound governance. And what we did next was then apply that factor to actual lived experiences that had us, dropping our jaws nearly every day, offer an analysis or interpretation, and then matching that to the criteria that we feel has been violated by the institution. So that's just an overall view of the process that we went through. Let me get back to this. So we've got 2 pages on our spreadsheet. One matches the AAUP indicators to the middle state standards. And then the second page is more of a case application. We are very willing to share this with anyone. If you would like to drop a request in the chat, we'll be happy to share these documents with you. But our analysis suggests 2 ways that the institution is controlling the process. And I'll let Janine talk about the first form of control.
Thank you, Nancy. So one of those ways of control that we were observing and experiencing is control over information and data. So at the early stages of the self-study design and information gathering process, the co-chairs, as well as some of the committee members, were really experiencing tight administrative guardianship over data and documents. And so the way that this was experienced at our campus was document requests that requests for data information that wasn't publicly available. And I don't necessarily mean just within the institution, I mean publicly available, was automatically considered to be sensitive, and information that requests should be reviewed by the administrative office of the provost, and then that information would be distributed to the co-chair or co-chairs, and then coded depending upon its sensitivity. And as you can imagine, through the self-study process, you are needing to gather just, volumes of documents from different offices. And in many cases, you're not really clear on where that documentation lies. In an ideal world, right, all of these processes would be documented and we would all know where those documents are and so forth, but that isn't oftentimes the case. And so when you're looking for evidence of an institution's compliance with standards, oftentimes you're having to go to those information sources to sift and sort and find exemplars to be included in the self-study report. And so it's difficult to say, this is the exact piece of information I want. But nonetheless, that's where we oftentimes ended up, was we'll just make a list of documents that we need to provide you, when in fact, you're not really sure what information is there. Another obstacle was created by our institution's non-disclosure agreements. Non-disclosure agreements are increasingly prevalent, and in fact, we witnessed a growing percentage of tenured faculty who, because of their participation in formal committees in the college, informal governance structures, were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which was really vague and left it to them, to the signator, to basically say, well, if I'm uncertain, I must then go to the upper levels of administration to determine whether or not I can share this information, and how it could be used in the purpose of the self-study. And finally, this fear of a firewall breach, and I'm quoting an administrator here, between Middle States, the process, the self-study process, the steering committee in particular, and other faculty committees. And so there was a real concern expressed multiple times that those of us who had access to information would be would share that through other committees, especially those that are advocating on the behalf of faculty.
Okay, thank you so much. We look forward to continuing this conversation. The whole issue of the NDA is really unbelievable, and I'm sure colleagues sitting around their rooms are quite disturbed to hear that, but thank you. So we'll continue this conversation during the panel. So we're going to move on to CSI with John and Jane speaking and sharing their experiences with us. So John and Jane.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Marcus Delgado. I'm a professor of political science at the College of Staten Island, part of the City University of New York. And I'm here with my colleague, John Verzani, who's a professor in the math department. After that presentation, I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and John's gonna start us off by explaining the situation at CSI. Let's see if I can get this to work now. It should be this one. However, it shouldn't be that one. We want to play it from the start. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to John.
All right, maybe the next slide then. So at the College of Staten Island, over the past year or so, we had a battle with our then president, we were assisted by the New York State AAUP. We're thankful, very thankful for that, and we're asked to share our story. So it started primarily with a vote of no confidence that was held December 17th of 2020. And the AAUP document on academic COVID-19 and academic governance highlighted some of the geological forces that led to this vote of no confidence, in particular this corporatization model that higher ed has been doing, including increased adjunctification And at the College of Staten Island, one of the key points in the vote of no confidence was the drastic cut to the adjunct faculty. Maybe more important was the emphasis that COVID-19 had a big financial pressure, but the report highlights that many of those quick financial pressures are actually slow financial pressures due to mismanagement over years. And so pre-existing financial difficulties were an issue. And in our vote of no confidence, we talked about the KUTRA, which is an internal name for our savings being exhausted, and drastically cutting the budget of the library. You know, the fact of the matter is our enrollment has declined a lot, and that's a big part of what makes a CUNY campus financially healthy. Jane and I wrote to the chancellor after the vote of no confidence to alert him of the vote and highlighted those points, the financial position and the fact that COVID-19 sort of highlighted deficiencies that maybe were not viewed before. I really want to tie in the fact that our president had poor communication skills with the report, but I couldn't come up with a tie. Anyway, in blowback to that vote of no confidence on March 3rd of 2021, the president came out and announced that he was going to overhaul our college governance plan. And he had a new plan. He called it new and more refined, and he was going to give us initially 20 days to discuss it. And then there would be a referendum held. 20 days, which I'd point out, it took him 1 year to consider some modest proposed changes to our plan, and he just had approved those modest changes in 2020 in the fall. So the 20-day timeline was completely ridiculous. One of the things that marks our current governance plan is we have a bicameral body that reflects essentially what we heard earlier this morning about the primary responsibilities of faculty. That's covered in our faculty senate, and then so I'll call them secondary responsibilities of faculty, where there should be voice but not primacy, and that would be reflected in our college council. The president chose to have a unicameral body with him at the helm and an executive committee that he would initially the wording was taken from the college senate membership, meaning he would select the members to be on this body, so it would be a sham as opposed to an election. And more over the process, the president repeatedly said he was just an agent of the board and that the approved means to modify our governance plan did not apply. The approved means required a successful referendum of the college community. He repeatedly stated that he reserved the right to simply forward changes to the board without campus approval. One of the things that's different from our case from what's highlighted in the report is that the board never tilted its cards to show that they were behind the president or not behind the president. Unlike, like, say, at Keuka, where the board was in on the attempts to change the structure of the campus. Anyway, reading the report was interesting because it highlighted several areas that I want to call the administrative playbook, including discontinuance of academic programs, termination of faculty positions, unilaterally moving forward with new governance structures, avoidance of faculty input in administrative searches, faculty participation in ad hoc governance processes, a suspension of faculty handbooks, excuse to blame the budget, and then alternative explanations. And I'll give examples of each, but I'm going to go through quickly because we don't have that much time, and I want Jane to give her a chance to speak. We didn't actually have officially canceled programs. But things were on the verge of dying because of administrative inattention. That was part of the reason there was a vote of no confidence, is that our administration at the time was somewhat incompetent. We lost 12% of our faculty lines, not again through selective choice of faculty terminations, but just out of an inability to manage a budget. And it got managed on the fact that faculty were fleeing and not being replaced. The president tried to unilaterally change our plan, not needing the campus approval. He moved forward. Instead of not having faculty searches, he discovered that he could have interim appointments that would bypass the search process altogether. And then the interim appointments could be turned into permanent positions at a later date through sham searches with ads written specifically for one person in mind. We did have ad hoc committees formed over the summer when this proposal got pushed back. It got pushed back twice before it moved to a final vote. Those ad hoc committees were, their work was never circulated. Their work was put into a sandbox where they could only consider certain aspects of the plan. And by and large, the plan that came out on March 3rd was not so much changed by the time the vote was held in late September. Of course, the CSI budget is bleak, and so there were certainly pressures that were involved, but part of that was an ongoing lack of enrollment that I'd emphasize was more the administrator's fault than demographics or other structural shifts. And finally, the use of the existing governments as a boogeyman became prevalent, in particular, germane to the last conversation, as we kept hearing that we needed to change our governance so middle states would agree. And yet when middle states came last month to visit, the word governance just barely got mentioned at all. All right, Jane, you want to take over from there?
So I think one thing that we didn't mention is that, as John said, we're a bicameral governance structure, and John is the chair of the College Council, and I'm the chair of the Faculty Senate. So the Faculty Senate actually is a kind of a subgroup of, we're just the faculty component of the College Council. So when he said we wrote to the Chancellor, it was because we're the two elected leaders, and in the president's proposed governance plan, both of our bodies that we chair would have been dissolved. So we didn't really take it personally, but there was some of that in there probably as well. But anyway, so what we did is when the governance plan came out, there was a tremendous outpouring of support from the faculty and the staff for us and for the existing governance structure, which we've had for quite a long time, and it gets worked on and discussed all the time. The other thing that's important to mention is that we are a unionized, I think there's someone from the Professional Staff Congress here today, at least one person. So we're also backed up by the union, which is very helpful. But there was a huge outpouring of solidarity from the faculty. They set up a website, as you can see, with all kinds of information. There was a huge, I put the list of some of the emails that went out, and we called special meetings. There was a whole group set up that was going to do outreach to the community, that was going to do outreach. We are the only public institution, we're the only public college in Staten Island. So our community is very important to us. And, there were people who are rallying the community. The other, whoops, I wanted to just finish with this one. I have to move this. Okay, we called a town. 300 people, over 300 people showed up on Zoom. The administration had put up a board, like one of those Microsoft meeting rooms, and everybody who responded to their call for comments were all negative. The referendum that John mentioned that was eventually held, the president eventually did hold a referendum in the fall on his proposed governance plan. It received an 87% no vote. There were just a huge outpouring of almost every academic department, and all of the other units wrote letters in opposition to the governance plan. So it was pretty unanimous, and it was, this is a happy story as it ends up, but we had a lot of support. Part of what happened was that we had a lot of help. And so there was a media campaign, and this article that you can see on the left with the picture of the president appeared in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And actually the outreach to the Chronicle of Higher Education we consider it to be one of the kind of tipping points in how this all played out, because I think it was, it made a big impact when it came out in the Chronicle of Higher Education. We also had support, as you can see. There were articles that were written. This is in the Clarion, which is the union newspaper. So there was a lot of outreach. A lot of people started to hear about this and started to talk about it. We also had outside supporters, and I think John mentioned Mary Rose and Hollis Blazer. We also had who really brought this to the attention of our Board of Trustees. They were, the AAUP, New York State AAUP was really strong behind us, and we're very grateful because we think it also had a huge impact on the eventual outcome of this. We also had a resolution from the University Faculty Senate, which you can see down here, which also is important. It plays an impact because clearly what was going on at our college was not isolated to the College of Staten Island. We feel that these kinds of challenges to faculty governance and shared governance are happening all over CUNY and probably, you know, as we know, in a lot of other places. And we also had a statement from our union, which was very helpful. So what ended up happening is the president resigned. He retired. And as you can see, it also came out in the Chronicle of Higher Education. It also came out in our local Staten Island newspaper. And as you know, one of the things that's kind of ominous in this headline that came out in the union newspaper that says CSI defeats governance plan overhaul for now. And the last slide is that, well, this is the student newspaper and announcing that the president retired. And that was in October, just this past October. And they appointed someone to replace him who came from another CUNY college. So, you know, I think that we all are very happy with the outcome here. I don't know that if our president, you know, we like to think that our campaign worked. It was a very intense campaign. It was extremely time consuming. And we like to think it worked, but we also know that, you know, these sorts of things are being challenged all the time. And so, you know, it's a success story, but it's also a cautionary tale. I don't know if John, if you wanted to add anything else, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that, so the internal pressure on our campus led to a strong no vote, but that still needed to be heard. And it's only from the external pressure that I think it did get heard. And the from the University Faculty Senate to the New York State AAUP on up to the national press, all those things must have made a difference, because although we haven't heard this for sure, I'm sure what happened was the chancellor asked our president to step down, and he stepped down within, what was it, three or 4 weeks of that, and he left by the end of that semester. So he basically got pushed out on this indication that he had a very weak hand and he overplayed it extremely. But it didn't have to turn out that way. Had the board been in favor of this, it might have been a completely different story. And so we would basically got lucky. It took a lot of hard work, but it still required things to break properly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you're being quite humble. It was an extraordinary organizing effort. And I think that it's just an example of doing it right. You know, contacting and being supported by many constituent groups, organizing the faculty on your campus. Really, job well done. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Mark James from Molloy College. So Mark, we're turning it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mark James. I'm an English professor at Molloy College out on Long Island, and I'm president of our advocacy chapter of Molloy AAUP, and also I'm a member of faculty council. And as I've mentioned in some of the chats, that was because of the way the administration tried to sideline our chapter and to say that since we're not part of governance, the former VPAA said that she would no longer speak to us. So and we would have to go through the faculty president. So one of the things that we wound up doing is my vice president wound up running for faculty president, becoming faculty president. Now there's a close alignment between, we speak every day. In fact, more than once. There's a close alignment between our advocacy chapter and our faculty council. now. Both of us are done at the end of this semester, so we'll see how that goes. I've got a lot of stories related to these issues. We've got an administration, we've got a very corporate-minded institution that is very concerned with the consumer model of higher education, seeing faculty as employees and students as consumers, and really developing that outward. So a lot of the stories that I've heard and my panelists describe are the same kinds of stories that we've gone through. I guess I'll just go with the story that came to my mind immediately regarding the shared, the use of the middle states was the way that our administration was, the new president that we've got from Michigan that just came in. He came in with an understanding from the accrediting agency they have there that there would be this effort to track student complaints that don't go to faculty members but go straight to the administration, and to make sure that they get resolved and to see how they get resolved. And so there was obviously a fear that we would have of that working against faculty members. And the reason we had this fear is because my institution had been using student complaints, for the reasons I'm talking about, to go after faculty members. And the complaints would sometimes be anonymous. They would not be, and they would create a list of all these complaints that went to the administration. And at the time, there was an attempt to dismiss a tenured faculty member based on a series of complaints that the faculty member had received that had never gone through any formal process whatsoever, but just because there was accumulation of them against that faculty member, they were trying to go through a dismissal process. We had to, as the New York State Conference was extremely helpful, Kimberly in particular, in getting us the resources. We were able to get a specific an attorney in order to help guide us through this particular process, and then to go back and to use the governance principles of the college, especially the dismissal process. Oh, and Erwin was really helpful too in talking about the committee, the hearing committee, the composition of the hearing committee. Fortunately, it never got to the stage of the hearing committee. We were able to win out after that. But what happened was the new administration had formalized this way that these student complaints would be used, so that the Office of Student Affairs, the Office of Student Affairs would be able to adjudicate student complaints with the faculty members, irrespective of the fact that the Office of Student Affairs does not have any specialty in the whatever the faculty members are teaching. So it was a clear academic freedom violation, and so then we had to push back on that. And eventually, we got that policy reversed and rejected. There are a series of other issues that I can talk about that are dealing with shared governance. The most immediate one, the most recent one, let me just go ahead and add that. In response to a survey that Molloy AAUP had put out a couple of weeks ago, that we had put out a couple of weeks ago, asking for our faculty to give feedback on the provost, the assistant deans, the faculty president, and whatever, just a basic instrument to get some sense of the temperature on campus, because we were getting a lot of complaints, a lot of reports of anxiety on campus. The administration tried to discredit, of course, the survey. And in this last week, the provost had a meeting with the faculty and invited some speakers that took up, it was an hour-and-a-half meeting of the faculty, invited some speakers that took up an hour and 10 minutes. And then when someone brought up the survey at the end, she dismissed it and said, we all should work together, just it's some kind of a, and then at the end said something about we need to revise our shared governance structure, and that needs to be done by the fall. And there has been no conversation on this, so now I'm a little bit anxious about where that's going. Fortunately, we're going to be able to overrule that. I hope we get a committee, a new faculty council that will push back on that. But sorry for the sort of scattered report there, but we're dealing with a lot of issues. So I'll just go ahead and end there, and then we can talk a little bit more about some of those later.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. You hit on many topics that are central to faculty control and the rights of faculty. So it's disappointing. I think I had chatted in a prior presentation to you. You have a new president, but it's the same. It's the same dance. It's the same game. Very, very disappointing. But thank you for sharing that. So, so now we're going to have the panelists. We have that panel interaction, so the panelists can interact with one another. You can also ask questions at this time, and we can continue the Q&A longer. So, so it's if the panelists want to interact with one another, or if people would like to ask questions, just raise your hand in the chat and you will be recognized.
I have a couple of things that have come up in the chat that we could address real quickly. Just a comment by Mary Rose on great coverage in the Chronicle and local media. I wanted to emphasize that because coverage, press, that is so important. Anne made a comment about, being an important victory. Chris Denny from St. John's asked Mark James, are you referring to a bias response for reporting mechanism? So Mark might want to address that and what he's talking about there. And Julie Beth Napoleon had said that that's going on. Everything goes through Title IX, even cases concerning academic freedom and the faculty members. So that also might be something that people want to, otherwise we're up to date with the chat.
Yeah, okay, so to address Chris's question, we now have a feature called ethics point, or ethics point, as I believe is the way that is one way that students and faculty are able to report anonymously. But I believe before it was just the students would go to the president or the vice president with, and there were reports that faculty members were spurring or pushing students to go report to the administration on specific faculty members. So sometimes it would be a yes, and sometimes they would say bias, but sometimes not. Sometimes it would be students saying, the professor rolled her eyes at me, or she gave me a dirty look while I was when I was trying to go to the bathroom, or something along these lines. This is the earlier stage. Now it's gotten to be a little bit more formal. But they did try to make it look like there are these structures in place. And like, as I say, the new faculty president, the new president of the college came in and said there's going to be this kind of a feedback loop. And he referenced the accrediting agency that he used in Michigan. It's escaping my head. We were looking at it just a little bit ago. But I looked at their standards and I see nothing like that. I don't know where he's getting that idea that the accrediting agency is going to be looking at student reports, complaints, individual complaints in a small way, and making sure that the administration deals with them like customer service kind of complaints. Yeah, but
that certainly sounds like a threat, doesn't it? Oh boy. Hollis.
Right. So this is not a question, but I want to support those of you who talked about how the union and the Senate work together well, and how important that is. Ours kind of go back and forth depending on who's doing what. But we do have I'm chair of the Academic Freedom Committee within the Senate. And I'm very much in contact with their union. So it's just, if you can have both bodies pushing back in the same direction, it really is helpful. But you have to coordinate, you need the right people in place.
Yeah, I would like to follow up on that because it's something I strongly believe in and have used, in fact, to do a vote of no confidence on my campus. And this was highlighted earlier today. But one thing, like just a cautionary tale that I think everyone should be mindful of, and that is when the union and governance work together, I would suggest that everyone is always mindful of their specific role and that there's no crossover, because when there's crossover, everything can fall apart and you don't want that to happen. So what we did on my campus, we met the executive committee of the governance body and the executive committee of the union met together. And it was incredibly important so we could move together as a united faculty to orchestrate the vote of no confidence. The vote of no confidence came through the academic governance body, the academic senate. But the union had the financial resources. So we sent letters. The academic senate sent a letter to every faculty member's home that the union paid for, articulating the issues that the president was violating regarding governance. Then the union sent a letter to everyone's home regarding the union issues, the contractual issues that that the president was violating. That's a very powerful connection. So I liked when John had referred to the importance of the Senate and the union working together, and Hollis just reiterated it. So thank you, Hollis. Anne. You're still muted, Anne.
Okay.
Yes.
It's great to hear these stories. And I have the really, really great pleasure of being retired and not having to directly deal with all of this right now. But I would imagine that the pandemic has great impact on our ability to organize. I mean, I remember John and Jane, other CUNY people will remember our struggle around pathways quite a while back when they tried to just completely break our curriculum. And unfortunately, although we are very, very strong at CUNY, both in governance and union, they were able to do a lot of damage, I think. But at that point, we could walk around and whenever we had a break or lunch and just pop into somebody's office and have a little chit chat or, meet in person, at the College Senate or what. And I imagine that in more ways than one, that this new situation has made it even easier for our administrations to try to trample all over us. And I'll just have one more thing that I said in the chat. One of the reasons that the victory at Staten Island, I think, was so important beyond the local college and even beyond the city university is that if they can break governance at a CUNY campus where we have a very strong union, we have a very strong governance, we live in the middle of New York City, we have, access to all kinds of ways of publicizing. If they can do it here, then my colleagues at smaller institutions that don't have unions, that are private institutions, I mean, they can just do it anywhere. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Anne.
Could I just wanted to jump in and respond to one thing quickly. I'm sorry, Nancy. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to respond to what Anne said about COVID and being online. It's a double-edged sword. I think we might not have been able to pull this off if we hadn't been online. And the reason for that is that we had a huge groundswell of people who came to meetings. We had 300 people come to our town hall meetings. We had meetings with people who we never, like this meeting that we're at right now, I don't think I would have been able to come to Albany or, you know, wherever the group is meeting. I think that we learned phenomenal lessons from being online in terms of organizing, solidarity. People were home, they could send letters. It was really, I think it really helped us a lot. So I'm sorry to jump in on Nancy, but I just wanted to say it's not all bad. I mean, COVID is bad, but being online is not all bad.
I think that's a really important point, and I'm glad you made it. Were there any issues with security in terms of, you know, being fearful that, how did you control who was at the meeting on Zoom? I know that we've been working hard with that with our union meetings, and it's been a bit of a challenge.
We didn't do that. We had no control put in place. We didn't have an issue. We got lucky, I suppose.
Yeah. No,
one of the things I wanted to add was that there was a pain point, and it came up today in Michael's presentation about communication between, I think he's making a point, communication between faculty, administration, and board, but we have no ability to directly communicate with the faculty. And so we had to work around that. There was a mailing list that was for a splinter part of the union. We could use the University Faculty Senate mailing list that had just then got put together. And even there, we were limited in what we could say. It was really hard to get a message out. And so these town halls where once people were there, we could really focus on the message and let people talk. It really made a big difference. So I would say it was very helpful. We had the online environment and people were comfortable with it, but there are still things that need to be addressed. And one of them is the ability to communicate as, in our case, faculty governance leaders with other faculty on campus. It's something that we need to still work for.
Yes, that's a point well taken.
We also very, 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 very harshly and seriously limited the amount of time that people could talk. So if anybody came in and wanted to grandstand about either the administration's position or anybody's, we just cut people off. And I think that's important to sort of maintain the conversation tightly, because otherwise, like somebody just said, you get I think Mark just said, you get the administration in there, they talk for an hour and 10 minutes and then you've got 5 minutes left. So anyway, I'll stop now.
Yeah, no, that's a really great suggestion as well. I was just curious, did you have private email lists whereby you would communicate with the faculty? Yeah. I mean, we learned several decades ago that we could not use our college server for those types of communications. I'm sure everyone has their private lists, but that in and of itself can be challenging at a big school. Who is the person who has the list and how do they keep it safe, et cetera. So thank you both. Nancy, we're getting back to you.
Thanks. So yes, communication is a huge area that Keuka also has contended with. Early in 2019, we were restricted by the president and the provost for using a faculty listserv for anything other than committee information and exchanges. And so what our experience has been with the pandemic is that has been exacerbated. And so instead of helping the faculty connect in an online format, it has kind of muffled our conversations. So I just wanted to acknowledge that bit about communication. And my original point that I wanted to make, Tom Carroll, our chapter president mentioned in an earlier session, I wanted to find out for Molloy and CSI how your self-study referenced the sanction, and I'm assuming that both of your institutions were sanctioned. And before I let you answer, let me just share with you how it was handled at Keuka College. So it was attended to in the ethics and integrity section, standard 2. The word sanction was not mentioned at all. And there was only discourse or explanation that the AAUP had conducted an investigation, and the results were unfavorable, they were unfair, and the AAUP has participated in a misinformation campaign about the institution. And it's just astounding to me that any accreditor would not want to see what an institution that has been sanctioned is willing to do to get that sanction lifted. And that does not seem to be the case at Keuka College. So I'd love to hear how that's been handled at Molloy and CSI.
Would the other panelists, Mark and John, any response to that? Oh, Mark's hand up, and so is John. So Mark?
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is and I've said this a few times in the chat, the invaluableness of a website, of having our MolloyAAUP.org website is a way where when I want faculty to participate in a survey, I don't put the survey on the Molloy website, I put it on Molloy AAUP, and they go and they fill it out there. So it's almost like they're leaving campus to go fill out a website, to go fill out a survey elsewhere. Because somebody reported me to the IRB for the most recent survey that I did, and they go, "Did you get approval for this?" And I said, "It doesn't need approval." I did the whole thing with research and all this. I had to learn all that stuff. I didn't know anything about it. I'm English. I don't know anything about IRB. So I had to learn about the common rule and all these other things to be able to deal with this particular person who was really trying to stick with the details of IRB, and had finally got the IRB chairperson to recognize that I don't need approval. And not only that, but I didn't distribute the survey on campus. The survey is elsewhere. They have to leave campus voluntarily to go fill it out. But anyway, but when I first started on AAUP, the faculty council was seen as a mouthpiece for the administration. So really, there was no way through the governance structure for me to have any kind of impact. And this was a way for me to speak directly to the faculty, but also by doing these password protected blogs that made it look like I wasn't advertising to the whole world, but I was, talking to the faculty. By making those password protected blogs, the faculty would go to them, and of course the administrators and board members of the boards of trustees would go look at those as well. And then that created certain kinds of pressures that allowed us to push back in ways that we wouldn't have been able to push back otherwise. And then, like I say, we eventually my former vice president and I, who got ourselves elected to faculty council, and right now, and who knows what we're going to be dealing with in a year from now. We may get another faculty council that is much more friendly to this administration, and we might be persecuted. Who knows? But I have access to the rest of the world that the college is really, and the college is really scared of anything going public. So if CSI going public is the worst nightmare for my administration. So that constantly having that as a threat is good. I think I was going to add something else, but I'm taking up too much. I'll start babbling now. So.
Well, we can get back to you for sure. John, were you going to respond to to that point about communication and protection of communication and all of that.
I was going to answer Nancy about censure and how it appeared in the Middle States report. So we were not censured, sorry, and ours was nipped in the bud before any governance was actually broken, and so the efforts were upfront, and so we didn't have to pay in the long run. But in terms of our Middle States report, which draft was just finished in February for review by the accreditors in March, so it's fairly common. It did slip in that our bylaws committee was going to consider the proposal of the president in some form, which was completely false and fabricated. And when the accreditors came, I made it certain to indicate that that was the case, that why would this committee consider something that failed so miserably and had such little popular support?
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I wanted to go to talk just a little bit, or to go back to the first presentation about Middle States, because I was originally asked to be on the Standard 7 governance committee for Middle States and the people who were preparing the self-study for Middle States. And when our former president came out with his governance proposal, I resigned from that committee pretty loudly, I guess. I said, there's no way I'm going to serve on that committee when the president is trying to dissolve the governance. But when the Middle States team visited, I was asked as the head of the faculty senate and asked by the Standard 7 people, and I also went with the College Council Executive Committee and met with the Middle States people, and we gave the Middle States people a real earful on what had gone on. And, and we basically, I think it was focused around Standard 7 and around the idea of governance. I have to say that when they came out with their report, I felt that it had sort of all of the complaints, and I wasn't the only one. The staff complained about morale. We complained about issues. We have bigger issues that have to do with not being able to retain faculty of color. I mean, we have all kinds of other issues going on. I kind of felt like it went in one ear and out the other. I don't know that Middle States, and that's why I was really fascinated by the first presentation that we heard, because I was wondering to what extent you really can have, to what extent Middle States really cares about shared governance. I guess that I think it's a valid question. Really, when they talk about governance, I think they're talking about is there a president? Are the structures in place? But I'm not sure about the quality. I wonder if anyone else has any thoughts about that.
I would just say that I agree, when you look at the governance standard, it is all about the role of the president, the role of the board, et cetera. And when I don't recall what year it was, and maybe York said it this morning, or Michael, when there was that standard for faculty, and that was a really important standard. And when that standard was approached by various colleges and universities, you could get shared governance into that standard. I remember clearly that that was how some colleges and universities did it. But I just feel that, which is why I was hoping that perhaps AAUP would reform the committee on accreditation. I just feel it's so critical that somehow faculty can have more of an authentic conversation, whether in the report or in the site visit. My feeling at my college, at least, is that the faculty are overlooked. They're almost a nuisance when the accrediting visit occurs. I don't know if other people have felt that. But as I had stated, I mean, the person who came, the head of the team that came to our campus had been sanctioned by AAUP the year before on governance. And I mean, something is clearly very wrong with this picture, right? In terms of in terms of who they picked for the committees. And I had been on a site visit a number of years ago. And I think, Judy, maybe you have been on site visits and you could share with us your experience. My experience was not a good one, but I was doing the faculty standards. So of course I tried to write they were a great faculty. So I tried to write a strong report. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents about accreditation. So Erwin, I see your hands up.
Yes. On accreditation, I just repeat what I said this morning, which is I think it's of no importance in protecting faculty governance. And I think what we've heard from the people on the campuses reinforces that idea. There is one value to it, which is that it can be used as a way of organizing faculty on the campus. Because when you prepare that self-study, and this is the way we did it when we had it at City College at CUNY, the faculty senate reached out to the faculty and asked them what were the difficulties that they faced in the area of governance. And we got all sorts of information that we did not know about, and that the Senate later followed up on long after the Middle States was gone. We were still able to pursue those issues. So the self-study can be used as a way of organizing your faculty and gaining information. But as far as accreditation goes, I think that's just an impossible situation. They're simply not interested in faculty governance. And it's a waste of time to even consider them as in this situation.
That's really interesting, Erwin, and a good tip in terms of how how faculty can get information in the self-study and then use that information in any way they need to strengthen the faculty. That's very interesting. Janine?
Yeah, just kind of adding to that part of the conversation. So I think from what we've talked about here, and certainly, Nancy and I have talked about this, that, the self-study process is being leveraged as a source of power over others within the context of the institution. And from a social capital perspective, I really, although I understand the comments in terms of it's not, Middle States is not certainly out to advocate for or protect faculty participation in shared governance. I do think that faculty bring legitimacy to the self-study process, and oftentimes, as we've talked about, faculty are asked to participate actively and in effect guide that process, and oftentimes serve, as either co-chairs or members of the steering committee. One of the biggest challenges of self-study is really knowing how those abstract concepts are indicated. And so that is one of the reasons that Nancy and I turned to the indicators of sound governance to say, okay, so, we can inform, again, this was in hindsight, but we could have informed that perhaps better by turning to those indicators and saying, these are the things that we're going to be looking for. That would have perhaps shaped our search for documents, shaped our interviews differently to be able to really gather that kind of information that certainly is out there in the experiences of faculty. And I think, just the recognition and the understanding that the self-study is a source of power, and that process is a source of power, and indeed it can be weaponized. We were, and I think Nancy might be able to speak to this point a little bit better, because I was taking notes during one of our meetings in which failure of a standard was described as a source of leverage over faculty. And so one would think that failure of a standard would not be something that would be seen in a positive light by any member of the administration. But in fact, it has been conceptualized as a way to leverage over faculty, especially standards that have direct relevance to teaching, learning, and assessment.
Nancy, did you want to follow up on that comment or anything you want to add?
No, thank you. I think Janine's covered it as well, but it was a surprise to us to hear that leveraging a failed standard was a strategy that presidents and administration would use.
Yes, indeed. Mary Rose, you're on.
Yeah, I would just like to actually second what Janine and Erwin just pointed out. I mean, yeah, we're not going to get middle states to tell our administrations to, strengthen our institutions of shared governance in the direction the AAUP would like. But it is a really good way to get information. And just a really small example of not our last study, but the self-study before, we had been trying as our AAUP chapter and even through our faculty senate to get job descriptions of administrators because we wanted to do what Mark just did, is we wanted to sort of run our own evaluation, but we're like, well, how do we evaluate them if we don't even know what they're supposed to be doing? And so, we just went, because they have to share this draft of the self-study with the faculty at some point in the process. And we looked at it and we're like, there's no job descriptions here. And it looks like they're supposed to be. And like immediately they showed up. And we got that information that we've been asking for like a year. So that's just a tiny example, but it is a good way to get information that they try not to give us.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good point, or getting an org chart, which just miraculously can appear right before the site visit. Someone, it might have been Leah in a previous, in one of the previous presentations, had asked if people on your campus, Leah, if it wasn't you, excuse me, but someone had asked if people get reassigned time or compensation for the extra work of participating in a self-study. So has anyone does anyone know if you've been on a self-study, or the people who chair the self-study? I can say on my campus, the people do get reassigned time who write the self-study, like the co-chairs, but it's a lot of work. So it doesn't look like anyone is compensated for that extra time. Okay.
Hang on, I can say something because we just went through middle states. Somebody in my department was a co-chair of the self-study, and I believe he got some release time.
Yeah.
Not sure how much. Those of us who were on the working groups, like myself, didn't get any release time. But I think my chair of my department, I think he was also head of one of the working groups. I'm trying to remember from the because I'm a unit coordinator, so I'm involved like in department P&B. I think I remember seeing in his multiple position form that he, or something that maybe the release time request, that he got some release time for being the head of the working group. I'm not 100% sure about that. I think there was something there, and I'm at CUNY. I'm at a hostess community college.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Leah?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the co-chair would get compensation typically as reassigned time, the faculty member, co-chair, or but the folks who are leading the working groups who've been roped into doing this, they are incredibly heavily overburdened by this work, and there is no discussion of compensating them. And we're hearing it in the union, right? They're coming to us. It's like the college is not interested. They're just not.
Right. It is an extraordinary amount of work, and perhaps it could count for work for promotion, but this is unpaid, clearly unpaid labor for sure. Yeah. So any other comments, questions?
I wanted to just, we don't get any compensation for Middle States or anything else, but I was just going to raise this question because when we were going at CSI, when we were going to the Chronicle, when we were going to all these other, bodies that we could use, there was a discussion about should we go to Middle States, and should we go to Middle States and tell them what's going on here? And I think we decided that we didn't want to go that far because we thought it might damage the college. Of course, we weren't shy about going to like the New York Times or anything like that, but we didn't want to go to Middle States because we thought that that might really work against us. But it occurs to me that I just wonder, and Janine has looked at this a lot more, and obviously other people have looked at this a lot more. I'm wondering if a college were to bombard Middle States with this kind of information and these kinds of grievances, if Middle States might wake up and say something's really wrong at this college. And I don't know the answer to that. I wonder if anyone else has any thoughts about it.
I think some of the information we've heard from other faculty today is that Middle States is not there to help us. They're looking at those standards. Clearly, they don't seem to be focused on the faculty. They got rid of that standard. How could they get rid of the faculty standard? I don't get it. So it's a really good question, but from what I've heard today, I'm not sure if that would be the approach. John?
Yeah, I would ditto that. I think what Erwin said, he said it quite well. You're not going to get that kind of help from Middle States. There might be indirect processes by embedding things in the report, as we've heard today, but definitely Middle States is not going to step in and be a fair broker.
Yeah, thank you. Mary Rose?
Actually, just like to see if Tanya would like to say more about what she put in the chat about the Canisius faculty and their 35-page complaint to Middle States. Tanya?
Sure, I can respond quickly. So we did do that bad thing in the midst of contacting the press and the Chronicle and all of that. We thought, yeah, why not contact Middle States? And it just so happened that one of our Middle States officers was the lead for our recent review with Middle States.
I think we've lost Tanya.
Oh no.
Right at a very riveting moment.
If I turn my video off, can you hear me now? Because
we can hear you. Yes, please continue.
Okay. Sometimes the video takes up too much bandwidth. Okay, so anyway, the person who was in charge of our Middle States visit was an AAUP member, and so she agreed to help us write this report. So we sent a 35-page long report outlining 4 standards that we thought had been violated by the Board of Trustees. We did send that, and they did respond to us, but they responded by saying that because there is a lawsuit pending on behalf of faculty, that they could not get information from the administration that they wanted, and so they would pick it up after the lawsuit was over.
There you have it. Oh, dear. And that was the
I don't
end
know.
of the conversation?
Well, I mean, it doesn't know, like I wrote to Middle States again recently, and they said, yes, your complaint is still, that means your complaint is still open and it's still pending. But right now, all we have is information from the faculty.
I see.
Information from the administrative side. So we can't be fair in our judgment because we don't have the administration side of the story, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it is an open complaint. That's all I can say.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, keep it open and let us know how it all plays out. It's interesting that you did that. Thank you. Anne?
Yes, and good luck.
Anne, you're muted.
Go on, Ann.
Sorry. Tanya, it's great to see your smiling face when you are on camera, because as I recall, you told us yesterday that you had recently lost 90 positions at Canisius. I don't know if I'm remembering that wrong.
Yeah, so we lost a total of 90 workers, 25 of whom were tenured faculty. So 90 workers in total,
Wow.
but 25 tenured faculty. I mean, we're a small college. We only have about, or did only have about 150 full-time faculty. So losing 25 is quite a lot for us.
Yeah.
And this was after a retirement buyout 2 years previously. So in 2017, we lost 30% of our faculty because of a buyout. And then in 2020, we lost another 25 who were fired.
How can they fire tenured faculty like that? What can they use to say
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
can get rid of so many people?
Well, that's the lawsuit.
Financial
Oh,
discrepancy.
okay.
And anyway,
Okay.
I had another comment, but I couldn't resist seeing your happy face there. I mean, that's what youth does, right? I mean, I'm an old retiree, but we need to remain optimistic and strong if we're going to stay in these fights. But anyway, I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday at the business meeting, the topic of one faculty came up and the importance of as I see it, full-time faculty seeing their interests very closely aligned with the plight of part-time faculty. And I think that, I mean, this struggle is getting harder and harder the more that administrations are relying on part-timers, the more they're relying on untenured faculty. And I wonder, I don't know if anybody can really answer this, but when we fight these battles and we think about governance, I know I've always been guilty of this, and I look on the screen here and I see all of you. I don't know all of you, but my guess is that most of us are full-time or retired from full-time. And we really need to consciously, I know, bring our mindset into the fact that governance cannot survive if the full-time faculty keeps being diminished. And that's where our common interests lie. And I would wonder in some of these fights, I mean, how the untenured faculty and how the part-time faculty who have no academic freedom or untenured, how we can bring them into these struggles and sort of protect them. Because if you're a full-timer, and certainly if you have tenure, you're relatively secure, okay? Not necessarily. So I'm just putting that out there as a very important component in the discussion of maintaining governance. Sorry.
Yeah, it is a really important point, Anne, and thank you for bringing that up. Unfortunately, we're at this state of affairs in the country where, like, at Canisius, tenured faculty have been impacted. Sally put the AAUP censor list in the chat. And Tanya had written in the chat that they were sanctioned by AAUP, and there's that current lawsuit, so thank you. And then Mary Rose put in the AAUP special report on governance. If you haven't read it, it involves the colleges in New York State last year, and the report that Michael did. It's really a great report. It's a good resource. Julie?
Had my video off because my computer internet connection is a little unstable, so I may turn it off again. I want to correct something. I I was talking about my chairman being the head of a working group and getting release time. I don't think he did, because I have another colleague who's in my unit that also was in charge of a co-chair of a working group, and he didn't. I don't believe he got release time. So, but I think one of my other colleagues who was the head of the the chair of the study itself, I believe, got release time. But some of what you're saying is actually sort of consistent with what I was seeing with going through this middle states business right now, because I felt like because I was on the working group with shared governance, and I felt like we got a really short shrift. They mentioned about how, like, it was wonderful that we were passing so much curriculum through, but some of the other matters that are, where governance was important, just didn't feel that it really got mentioned. And I tried to, when we went to some of the meetings, the site visit was earlier this week, so I tried to, where I could, bring up about shared governance and the value it had, and talked also about the University Faculty Senate, which I'm a member of, and how there's like, a back and forth, and I'm actually a person that reports to the Senate all the time, and I try to give very detailed reports back to our Senate. Matter of fact, never had a chance to say this in earshot of John Versani. I actually brought up about the issue, what was going on at CSI last semester, to give our faculty a heads up, because it's a slippery slope. If something happened there, it could, continued snowballing to, to other campuses. So I want to say that. And also, what you're saying is consistent with the middle states reports. And this goes back to experience that I had years before I was at CUNY. I was actually at LIU, where the Board of Trustees, or the president, maybe in concert with the Board of Trustees, unilaterally disbanded the University Faculty Senate as it existed. And they had the deans who were appointed be the faculty council, which had very little to do with, interacting with faculty in, I think, in a meaningful manner. And we had reached out to AAUP, who, like, we thought it was, some of that would end up getting reported in the middle states reports, some sense of what that, issue, and none of it. It was like just brushed under the carpet completely. And what the Board of Trustees did allow was like a shadow University Faculty Senate to exist, which I actually was a member of, but they had no real meaning to it. And I do want to say, shared governance is really important. Sometimes CUNY works with SUNY and their governance, and there are times where we've had actually meaningful impact. Like Cuomo a number of years back, and I think everybody remembers this, he wanted like experiential learning to be part of like the curriculum, like hands down 6 months, and we pushed back working with SUNY to slow it down. Nobody disagrees with the value of experiential learning experiences as students, but the way he was putting it into play was just impossible, and it needed to be done much more carefully and more slowly and thoughtfully.
Thank you for reminding us of those moments. Jane?
I just wanted to make a quick comment about this question of adjuncts and part-time faculty versus full-time faculty, because it's one of the things that I think is, it may be the biggest issue in governance in the coming years. Mm-hmm. And in our case, I think we felt that the adjuncts were sort of weaponized against us, because when the president came back and had a revised governance plan after we had pushed back, and he came back after the summer and he had a few revisions, he basically made some promises or some kind of concession or acknowledgement of the part-time faculty, because they were going to vote in the referendum. So we had a referendum that we said, 87% voted against his governance plan, and the all instructional faculty were included in it. And so the adjuncts all voted, and the president all of a sudden cared about the adjuncts so much and was basically courting them. And, in a sense, almost saying, oh, well, these full-timers, they're all trouble and they've all been in charge for too long. And, but I'm your friend and we're going to get more positions for you and more pay. And I don't know what else he said, but he really pitted the part-time. I think he really did some politicking with the part-timers kind of against us. So they really need to be part of the discussion, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. And that's just such a great tactic for an administration, right? Play the faculty against one another. And now Angel wants to speak, and I'm sure he'll speak to this very issue.
Yes, you're right. I'll make it as fast as I can, though. I appreciate the time. Well, there's a few lessons that we can get out of this. First of all, whether you're full or part-time, we need to be untenured and unafraid. We need to really think about that. We just need to keep fighting against this. And part of the reason I really appreciate this conversation, because at my other adjunct job at Antioch University, they've been having a very similar conversation, not with the accreditation agency, but with the APA, because for a long time, Antioch was relying on adjuncts to cover the clinical psych programs. And APA said, we're not going to recertify you unless you hire more full-time faculty. So watch out where we can take advantage of what accreditation agencies, not just the regional agencies, but also what professional agencies have to say to us. And that's a real thing to take care of. There's a way we can use that to our advantage to make them avoid identification. That's definitely a big possibility. And it looks like there's going to be a conversation going to be happening in Antioch, because guess what? Antioch just got unionized by SEIU 9 to 5 over based in Seattle. So, hey, we just got to keep on with these struggles. And like I said, adjuncts and untenured full-timers need to come together again, be untenured and unafraid.
Thank you so much, Angel. Those were two really important points, and I love the untenured and unafraid. Maybe we'll have that for our conference theme coming up with the one faculty. I mean, that's absolutely true. And the way that can happen is if all faculty join hands, right? And you bring up a point that actually hasn't been touched upon today, and that is accrediting bodies for various disciplines. That's something that we really haven't thought about, and maybe we can start those conversations at another time. But that is really important. Judy.
Thanks, Kimberly. Yes, hi, my name is Judy Sue. I'm from Molloy College, and I'm not an expert in mental states, but I have to say that I've been on a number of self-study visits, being on the team. And, you know, I think it's really important to have enough representative of faculty members on the team. It's very, very important. And on the self-study visits I've been on, I don't know, I think maybe it's my 7th or 8th. I just had a recent one that was virtual. I am only maybe 1 or 2 faculty members, and the rest are administrators. And remember, the self-study team is chaired by a president, a college president. So I think we need more volunteers. We really, I encourage faculty members, please volunteer to be a peer evaluators. It's really, really important that we have a voice. I've sat in self-study teams where I would voice about governance, and we need to do this and we need to do that, and we really should question this. And I always get back, well, we're here to help peer institutions. We're not here to prescribe. And that is true. Middle States is told not to be prescriptive, but it's so different. Every team I have served on is always so different, and anything can go. And please remember that it's really, really important that we get more faculty representation in the team, and that's really a critical way to hear our voice. And another note I like to make is that governance is always a topic. Every visit I've been in, we've always had discussions about governance, because there's always a group of faculty member who voice their concerns, and we still can listen to them, but there isn't much Middle States can do because we can't prescribe how governance structure should be. However, it doesn't mean that we don't listen. There are other ways to kind of express that need. For example, I was in the Middle States and I really felt like this one particular visit was that there was something going on at this college where I felt like there was just really no lack of faculty participation or voice. But I was successful in voicing that maybe we should put in the report that there should be a recommendation of better communication and faculty involvement. So there are ways that a team member could voice the concern, but as a Middle State team member, we're very restricted. And we are chaired by a college president who also manages us in what we do. And but another important note I'd like to tell you guys is that every time I'm called on these teams, we do get the self-study ahead of time. So we have it about maybe more than a month, maybe even 2 months ahead of time to be the self-study. And then we are told to review it and do a draft even before going on a campus. So faculty participation in what's in the self-study is also important because based on the self-study, the team members are asked, which people do you want to interview or what sections, what section or what part of the self-study do you have a question and concerns about? So it's really, really important to put something in the self-study that kind of raises the question. And hopefully if a faculty member who's part of the team sees that it's kind of questionable, so maybe I want to interview that person, but it's really up to the team that decides on who they want to interview. And the chair of the team doesn't really have much to say on that. So that's just my tidbit. There's just, it's always different. It's a nice experience, but also it can be very frustrating.
Thank you, Judy. That's really, really helpful and informative. We're very overworked, so it's really commendable that you're able to do this and make a little bit of a difference, probably not too much, just because of the way that the Middle State standards are formulated. But if you can ask those questions and get a few sentences in there, that's wonderful. So thanks for doing that for everyone, for all the faculty.
Sure.
Leah?
Yeah, so I was just going to go back to the part-time faculty discussion, and in our on our campus, our union, which is unaffiliated, is a union of the full-time and the part-time all together. And that really helps with the, so that's the one faculty, one resistance, right? Like that was, that came up yesterday as Anne brought up, and I had suggested this would be an important topic for our next conference, and it sounds like plenty of people, are on board with that. But what I just wanted to comment on was that how much organizing our union has done over the past, I'd say it started in like 2013, to try and educate folks, both the full-time folks and the part-time folks. We removed the word adjunct from our contract altogether, because faculty are faculty. And so they're not adjunct to the college, they're central to the college. Their work is just part-time work. If they would like to be full-time, that's also possible, but it doesn't diminish that they're faculty. And so it's almost, I don't know, adjunct's just not, if you look it up in the dictionary, it certainly wouldn't express the contributions that our part-time faculty give to the college. But just thinking about how much, like just understanding the organizing and how much work it takes to really craft language that supports all faculty, and that and as Anne has said a couple of times, that we need the full-time faculty, especially the tenured full-time faculty, to be those advocates at the table and say, this is important, this is what we need. We've been doing that at Dutchess, and I'm the lead negotiator. And we started our negotiations on the part-time contract, and unbelievably, we had full-timers then start complaining because it was putting off for a couple of months that we weren't going to be talking about the full-time contract. And then had a resolution brought to the union to say, get working on the full-time, basically tossing the part-timers aside. And thankfully, when that came to a vote, 73% of the vote was in support of the negotiators and continued doing what we're doing. So it takes an incredible amount of organization, but it's really important work, because if we are not supporting each other, it is just contributing to the downfall of higher ed that we're all observing. So thank you.
Well stated, Leah, and that's wonderful that you use the word faculty and not adjunct and part-time, full-time. That's really wonderful. It's a good statement about the philosophy on your campus that the faculty have. It's wonderful. So there had been a hand up, but it went down. Sally, how are we on time? We have about 5 minutes left, but we can move into closing remarks by Sally and Mary Rose if there are no further comments or questions. All right, so Sally and Mary Rose, I'll give it over to you. But before I do so, I really wanted to thank the panelists for the presentation, for sharing your stories with us, which are really, they're just heart-wrenching and also inspiring on either side of it. So thank you so much. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, everyone, for speaking up. So Sally and Mary Rose, I'll turn it over to you. So Mary Rose, you're
okay. Yeah, thanks. I will just reiterate my thanks to all of the panelists and our presenters from this morning. But I think especially our panelists, just reiterate what Kimberly said, just thank you. I think I say this every time, but these stories are so important, right? And sharing them is so important. And we are here at the state conference to help you fight those fights, because that is the only reason for us to even be here as a state conference, right? I mean, the fights that we need to fight to preserve higher ed and to preserve our democracy, right? They're happening at the local level, they're happening on our campuses. And like Julie Schmidt at National Voice says, when we fight, we win, right? But if we don't fight, we will lose. We've seen that, right? We've seen that for the past 30 years. And I think it's time, right? And when we fight, we win. Right? I mean, look at CSI. I mean, you guys rocked. That was amazing, right? We got good coverage in the Chronicle, right? And we can do that. We need to tell our stories. And the state conference is here as a resource, and we're just going to keep doing this. And there's, we got to keep fighting this fight, because we're at a serious juncture right now in our society and our democracy. And we need higher ed. We need a diverse higher ed. We really need to look at that. And I'm glad some of you all mentioned that. This organization needs to do a better job at that as well. Because this is about the future of our country and our society. So thank you for all the work that you are doing on your campuses. And I will, with that, hand it over to Sally.
Thanks, Mary Rose. I think one of the things that I just like to mention here is Mary Rose is talking about everything the state conference, is trying to do and everything. And I want to thank all the members of the state conference leadership for all of their time and all of their energy that they put into serving our members and our chapters. Without them, this job would be much more difficult. So I just want to say thank you to our state conference leadership. And thank all of you for attending today. The recording and the slides and other pieces of this will be available shortly. We do have a YouTube channel now that we're hosting videos on, and we have check the website on Facebook page. I would encourage these conversations to take place on our Facebook page. Tag us, like us, Twitter, do all of those things, because the more people that know about the work, the more people that realize that these conversations are taking place, the more people that we're going to be able to engage in these really important fights for our freedom, for academic freedom and for academic integrity, and certainly for shared governance and the rights of all faculty. So thank you again for spending your Saturday with us. We really appreciate it, and look forward to the fall conference coming up in October.
Thank you. Thank you.
When
Thank
Sally,
you.
Angel wants to know what the YouTube link is. Maybe you could throw that in the chat for
Yeah, except it would probably take me longer to. Hang on.
Don't worry about it. We'll look it up. Thank you.
Angel, I'll send it out. It's, oh, hang on a second. Here it is right here. Faster than I thought. Okay, let me just throw that in the chat here. There we go. That should link you all to it. Once I have it up here. All right.
And thanks, Sally, and thanks again to everybody for coming. And again, I put it in the chat, but if you're interested in helping organize for our fall meeting, which we decided yesterday, it's going to be virtual again. So we'll be meeting sometime in October, virtual meeting, and we're going to be focusing the Saturday portion on this issue of one faculty and presenting a united front. How do we support each other? Rather than asking students to report our colleagues, which is like horrific. I can't even believe those stories. Yeah, so yeah, how do we present a united front? So if anybody's interested, and all of our contact information is also on our state conference website. So, but let me know, because I'm putting together our conference organizing committee in the next few weeks. So thank you.
Wonderful. With that, I'm going to stop our recording.